Use the power of discovering new habits to create success in all areas of life. Body, fitness and nutrition, being, spirituality, passion and purpose, balance, marriage, kids and relationships, business, marketing, sales, leadership and systems. Transform your life by learning how habits work. And now your host, husband, father, entrepreneur, trainer, coach, and warrior, Jesse Ewell.
Welcome back to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Ewell, and today we're going to be talking about the habit of co-creation. What exactly is co-creation, you may be thinking? Well, if you look up a standard definition, there really isn't one. And the ones that there are, they're completely towards some type of marketing, some type of like business, but I really want to talk about this other side of co-creation. So the best way I can describe this is co-creation is your ability to imagine, dream, set a goal around something new. It's a way to collaborate or to have collaboration with someone else and something you work together on with someone else. You see, co-creation is not a solo effort. It's an active involvement from both sides that's open to begin to share values. And you share values simply based on, hey, these are the things that I value, and the other person may share the things that they value, and you co-create those values together. You make something new out of those values together. Most people in today's world are not conscious of what they are creating in life. They are caught up in the day-to-day world. And sometimes I find myself guilty of this at times, and then I wonder how I end up in a specific place or a certain place in certain areas of my life. And it's easy to forget that we are always creating. We are always co-creating. But there's two ways that we do this. We are either unconsciously co-creating or we are consciously co-creating. You see, many people will limit what they think is possible in co-creation because of another person. You know, whether it's your spouse, your friends, your family, your business, maybe your strategic partners, whatever it is, or maybe it's the circle you hang out with. But I've actually watched this happen inside of my own marriage, and I want to just talk a little bit about this. I can remember for about 2 or 3 years wanting to expand my gyms back before we actually, expanded into 2 locations. I can remember wanting to do this for a few years and kind of resisting it because I didn't think my wife wanted to do it. And so out of that, I can remember times where I began to resent my wife because I didn't actually want to have the conversation with her about expansion and expanding our gyms. And then once I had the conversation, I realized that a lot of the resistance was just in the way that I communicated, because I had a story that said my wife didn't want to expand. And through that, what I started to co-create was more of what I didn't want. Take this one step further. I can remember wanting to move to California. And every time it seemed to be brought up around my wife for a few years before we actually moved, she was like, no way. I don't want to move. I don't want to leave our family. I don't want to leave what we have. And so as she continued to do this, I less and less wanted to talk about it. I less and less believed in it until one day it was like, no, I'm staying with this vision. I'm staying with this thing of wanting to sell the gyms. I'm staying with this thing of wanting to move to California until I actually drew it up in my imagination and said, okay, listen, here's where I want to go. Here's where we want to go together. And all of a sudden, over 2 years, it slowly began to shift to where my wife wanted the same thing. But until you express what you actually want, what you actually imagine, whether it's to your spouse, to someone else, they're not always going to agree with it, especially in the beginning. So understand this. Your spouse is not always going to agree with you. Your business partner may not always want to agree with you. And in fact, where I see this show up most is most men that I coach or I have interviews with inside a habit-based lifestyle hold back in their business because they don't think their wife wants to create the same thing. They hold back because they fear what their wife may do, what their wife may think if they took their business to a certain place. And so they hang on to this. Instead of actually working through it with their wife, they hang on to this story and they begin to co-create this thing that they actually don't want. Then they lose passion in their business. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to confront it. And so unconsciously, this man ends up co-creating exactly what he doesn't want. A suppressed marriage, that he stops talking about his imagination, his vision. That suppressed marriage runs over into a suppressed business. And they show up to work and slowly becomes less passionate about what he's doing. And instead of feeling like they're on the same page, they feel like they're actually working against each other. You see, so often in marriage, in many of the couples that I see and speak to, they usually want the same thing. They're just confused about how they actually get there. Even inside of business relationships, business partners, oftentimes both people want to be successful. We know this. Both people want to be successful. The problem is they think success means that I have to give up something to get it. And so the true purpose in co-creating and why we co-create is that we actually begin to work together, that we actually begin to imagine things together, that we actually begin to share each other's values so we can begin to create what we actually both want. And I really believe the purpose of your marriage, the purpose of your life is actually to co-create. Because when we do it individually, there's not a lot of fulfillment when it comes individually. And more times than not, you're actually very rarely ever creating something by yourself. But when you co-create together, there is so much more power, so much more fulfillment that comes when you're able to do this together. Understand that when you create, you build with anyone else, whether it's your spouse, friends, family, employees, even God. You are honoring each other, and there is a greater sense of fulfillment and gratitude that comes when you can begin to honor each other. Rarely are you creating on your own. I actually really think of the only times we are creating on our own is when we're creating what we don't want. The times that we are creating on our own are when we're creating what we don't want. Other than that, we are always co-creating something. The truth is we are co-creating all of the time, but are we doing it unconsciously? The problem with this is when you co-create unconsciously, you are often creating what you don't want. And when you're creating what you don't want, you're trying to figure out, hey, how did I end up here? And so I want to ask you a question today. What area of your life are you co-creating unconsciously? Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe you're wondering why shit's not working in your marriage. Well, what are you unconsciously co-creating? What are you unconsciously sending as a message to your spouse? Maybe it's inside of your business. What are you co-creating inside of your business? What message are you unconsciously sending to your clients, to your employees, to the people in your marketing that you're trying to attract? And then you're wondering why it may not be working. You're wondering why you may not be making the money you want to make. And part of it is you are unconsciously co-creating the exact opposite of what you don't want. And so I want to walk you through this simple process of how do you actually begin the process of co-creation. The most important step is to be conscious of what you are creating. Some may call this a vision. Some may call this a goal. Whatever you call it, if you don't share this with the people closest to you in your life, even if they don't agree, you will not be able to co-create with anyone. I can remember times in business sharing my vision, sharing my goals, and many of the people inside of my business didn't agree with it. But it didn't agree with their thinking. It didn't agree with where they were at in life. But guess what? It was my vision and my goal. So it didn't matter if they agreed or not. But if I didn't share it with them, they never had an opportunity to jump on board and share that vision also. So keep in mind that many times when you're sharing your vision and you're sharing your goal, the reason people don't jump on board is because it's not their vision and it's not their goal and it's yours. But if you don't share it, they never have an opportunity to jump on board or jump on the bus with you and begin to share that vision and co-create together. Co-creation is about bringing together your imagination with someone else. Could be your spouse, could be a friend, family, mentor. It could also be business partners. It could also be people that you influence. But this is about imagining something greater in your life. One of the biggest things that I watch people do is they lose their imagination. I can remember times as a kid, I can remember times in junior high, high school, imagining myself owning a gym one day. Owning a gym one day and being able to run it. And at that time, there were no personal training facilities. So the gym I imagined then was not exactly the same gym that I actually started, but eventually it would grow into something greater. But that all started with imagination. Your vision will come, your goals will come from your imagination. This means that you get to make up from the people you come in contact with, to the things that you remember as a kid. So your circle of influence, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your friends, whether it's people in your life, maybe even coaches, begins to help you imagine something greater in your life. And if you hang out with people in your circle who have more of an imagination, who are creating, they have massive influence over on you. You can actually see yourself being this person. This is why it's important to surround yourself with people who have imagination. This is why it's important to surround yourself with people who have goals, who have vision, who are pushing themselves to somewhere else, because you get to imagine yourself at times. They get to imagine themselves at times similar to you, and you get to kind of co-create together. You see what's possible through someone else. That gives you a vision for your own life. You get to use your imagination and say, hey, man, I would love to have some of these things. But this is the part of co-creation that very few people talk about. And I think about inside of our program, Marriage Boot Camp. Couples often come in unconscious of what they were creating inside of their marriage. And so as they become unconscious, they're like, man, how did we end up here? Well, you unconsciously co-created how you ended up here. And so inside of 2 days, they're now conscious of what they are co-creating together. And as you're conscious of what you're co-creating together, you actually get to begin to create the life, co-create the life that you actually want. And so really what you're doing inside of co-creation is you're co-creating from an unconscious place everything that you don't want, coming to a conscious place to learn how to actually co-create with your spouse, with someone else, the life that you actually imagine. Not only that, the life that you imagine, but the goals that you actually set, the vision you actually set together, and you begin to move into that direction. And the one thing I can say about co-creation and what I've experienced with my own wife, my own kids, my own family is this: when two of you are heading into the same direction, it's so much more powerful than one of you. And if you can get in alignment with your spouse, with your family, with someone else, and begin to co-create together, there is so much more power and so much fulfillment inside of that at time it will make you feel unstoppable. So I appreciate you guys being on here today. If this message resonates with you, leave me a review. We would love to have a review. Maybe you want to begin taking your marriage to the next level. This is an opportunity to jump into Marriage Boot Camp, even our 14-day marriage upgrade program, where we teach you how to unconsciously co-create in your marriage and start co-creating what you actually want in your life and in your marriage. Maybe you want to be one of our next case studies and begin living this habit-based lifestyle. If you have questions, concerns, you want to leave us a review, whatever that is, feel free to reach out to me, Jesse at habitbasedlifestyle.com. Until next episode, have a great day.